The infamous October 7 massacre that sparked a war. But one confounding yet eye-opening motive has escaped the headlines.
On April 22nd, Jewish people all over the world are going to be celebrating Passover. In my opinion, Resurrection Sunday should always coincide with Passover, but Pope Gregory XIII decided otherwise. In contrast to the Jewish calendar, which follows moon cycles, a new moon signals a new month, the Gregorian calendar follows the sun. I have no idea why we deviated from God's calendar the way he set things up for feast days and such, or maybe I do, but that's for another video. Nevertheless, April 22nd is Passover, which commemorates Israel's liberation from slavery after 430 years in Egypt. Before the last plague, the Hebrews were instructed to sacrifice a lamb and take the blood of that lamb and spread it on the doorposts of their homes. At midnight that night, the Lord struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of livestock. There is obviously more involved with Passover tradition regarding food and dress, but today I'm going to be focusing just on sacrifices, specifically the sacrifice of a red heifer. So, what does a red cow or heifer have to do with anything, especially Passover, the end times, and the current war in Israel? I want you to take a look and listen to the CBS News report. CBS News, a mainstream news media outlet, talking about the war in Israel and how it relates to a red cow. Take a listen.
The infamous October 7 massacre that sparked a war. But one confounding yet eye-opening motive has escaped the headlines. In a recent speech, a Hamas spokesman blamed the Jews for bringing red cows to the Holy Land. The cows he's talking about at a secure, undisclosed location are these, red heifers, to be precise.
You heard that correctly. A Hamas spokesman blamed the Jews for bringing red cows into the Holy Land, and that is what sparked the massacre of 1,200 innocent human beings, including children, on October 7th, 2023. Does that sound crazy to you or what? Well, maybe it's not as crazy as we think. When you understand the significance of the red heifer, you'll understand why these cows have caused so much chaos in the Middle East. To meet the requirements of Old Testament laws, a red heifer is needed to accomplish the purification of the Israelites from uncleanness. Specifically, the ashes of a red heifer are required, and Numbers chapter 19 lays all of this out. Many people today, Jews, Muslims, and Christians, regard the appearance of a red heifer as heralding the construction of the third temple and the return of Christ, and that is what has rocked the Muslim world. The third holiest site in Islam, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, currently occupies the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, along with the Dome of the Rock, which is an Islamic shrine that covers the rock where Muslims believe their Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven on a half mule, half donkey, winged mythical creature, and they are not about to give up that real estate. This is also the same rock where Jews believe Abraham bound his son Isaac, and some believe is the same rock upon which rested the Ark of the Covenant inside the Jewish temple within the Holy of Holies. Now, back to the red heifers. According to Jewish oral tradition, there have only ever been 9 red heifers sacrificed. They're just not that easy to find. The first one was sacrificed by Moses, and the 9th was sacrificed sometime before the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. Maimonides, an ancient Jewish rabbi, believed that the 10th would only be found and sacrificed when the Messiah was ready to appear. For 2,000 years, the Jewish people have been searching for a perfect red heifer. But in September 2022, a Texas rancher and evangelical Christian named Byron Stinson found 5 perfectly unblemished red heifers, and he sent them from Texas to Israel with the help of the Temple Institute. Now, perfectly unblemished, meaning only red hair is on these cows, not a single white, black, or gray hair. Only red. Even the hooves have to be red. And not only does this cow have to be perfectly red, it must be a female, which has never been pregnant, milked, or yoked. And of these 5, 1 has already been disqualified. Rabbis go over these cows with a magnifying glass to make sure they remain perfect. The older the cows get, the more likely the chance is that they will develop some other coloring. And as of March 17, 2023, the red heifers were between 1.5 and 2 years old. In order to replicate the ceremony mentioned in the Bible, they need to be at least 3 years old. That means at least one of them is now qualified for this sacrificial ceremony. But let's get back to the Temple Institute for just a minute. This organization, which was established in 1987, is dedicated to every single aspect of preparing for and building the third temple in Jerusalem. They have already restored or constructed the sacred vessels required for a temple service, made according to the exact specifications from the Bible, using the original source materials such as gold, copper, silver, and wood. And all of them are ready for use, including musical instruments played by the Levitical choir, the golden crown of the high priest, the gold and silver vessels used in the incense and sacrificial services, and the 3 most important and central vessels: the 7-branched candelabra or menorah made of pure gold, the golden incense altar, and the golden table of showbread. They also have prepared the sacred uniform of the high priest, and all of these items can be seen at the Temple Institute Museum. They even have 9 priests descended from the tribe of Levi who have never been to a cemetery, and more on that in just a second. They're trained and ready to go. Devout Jews pray daily, "May it be your will that the temple be speedily rebuilt in our time." And they have been praying this prayer since the Jewish temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. But why a red heifer? What's the significance of this animal being sacrificed? It's significant because the state of ritual purity obtained through the ashes of a red heifer, for whatever reason, is a necessary prerequisite for participating in a temple service, necessary for the ritual purification of corpse uncleanness caused by an Israelite coming into contact with a human corpse, human bones, or a grave. Since 70 AD, the Jewish people have been scattered to the 4 corners of the earth, and the chance that they would ever return to their homeland and establish a state, let alone their own language, was astronomical. But as a result of the Holocaust, on May 14, 1948, the United Nations established the modern state of Israel. Since the beginning of time, there has been an irrational hatred of the Jewish people, and I've never understood it. Well, I kind of do understand it. It's a spiritual thing conjured by Satan himself. But look at this map. See that little tiny sliver of red? That is Israel. They are literally surrounded by Muslim countries, and this whole Gaza Strip chaos, Israel left Gaza in 2005. No presence remaining whatsoever, and Hamas took over. Why would anyone blame Israel for the conditions in Gaza and not Hamas? Why won't the surrounding Muslim nations, because there are a lot of them, why won't they absorb those Muslims living in Gaza, which is pretty much now destroyed? They don't want them. They don't want Hamas in their country either. And Israel's current boundaries aren't nearly what God promised them in the Old Testament. And as far as Palestine, the word Palestine comes from the word Philistine or Philistia in Greek. And originally, this area was occupied and settled by Philistine invaders. And most scholars believe the Roman Emperor Hadrian changed the provincial administrative name of Judea to Palestine in order to erase the Jewish presence in the land. Now, let's move on to prophecies. We are dealing with a few of them here. First, the Holocaust, which was prophesied in Isaiah 3:24. And so it shall be, instead of a sweet smell, there will be a stench. Instead of a sash, a rope. Instead of well-set hair, baldness. Instead of a rich robe, a girding of sackcloth, and branding instead of beauty. We also have the fulfilled prophecy of the Jewish people returning to their homeland in Jeremiah 29:14. I will be found by you, says the Lord, and I will bring you back from your captivity. I will gather you from all the nations and from all the places where I have driven you, says the Lord. And I will bring you to the place from which I caused you to be carried away captive. And now we have the presence of red cows in Israel, the sacrifice of which will purify the priests and pave the way for the building of the third temple. Now, the Jewish people are still waiting for the Messiah. They don't believe Jesus was the Messiah. Personally, I think the one they're waiting for is going to end up being the Antichrist. 2 Thessalonians 2:3-4 says, let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. But before that can happen, the temple has to be rebuilt. Matthew 24:15-16 says, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. So, what's the abomination of desolation? The Institute for Creation Research states, the abomination of desolation refers to the image of the beast, which will be set up by the Antichrist and his false prophet as an object of enforced global worship. This will take place, according to Daniel's prophecy of the 70 weeks, after the prince that shall come, that is the Antichrist, has made a 7-year treaty with Israel to allow their ancient temple to be rebuilt in Jerusalem and their worship rituals to be reestablished. He will break this covenant in the midst of the week, that is after the first 3.5 years of the treaty period, and erect his overspreading of abominations, his great idol image with overstretching arms mocking the cherubim in the original holy place in God's temple. This will signal the unleashing of his genocidal fury against Israel and all who refuse to worship him. Guys, I really believe we are living in the last days. It might still be 50 years away, but I don't think so. If just one of those red heifers remained unblemished, I mean, look at what we're dealing with here right now. Over the weekend, Iran officially catapulted themselves into the war with Israel, although they've been in on it funding-wise from the beginning. They officially stepped into it on Saturday when they launched ballistic and cruise missiles along with hundreds of suicide drones into Israel. I was getting non-stop red alert notifications on my phone as rockets or drones headed to the Dead Sea hotels, Migdal, Masada. They were relentless. And I asked my husband, if Hamas started the October 7th attack because of the red cows just being in Israel, do you think Iran got in on this to stop the sacrifice on or before April 22nd's Passover? That's literally the first thing that came to my mind when all of this started happening on Saturday. One video I watched showed drones or rockets being intercepted over the Temple Mount. Now, how ironic would that have been if one of Iran's own missiles had ended up destroying one of their most holy sites? Oh, and I forgot to mention one thing. They have already built the altar for the red heifer sacrifice. And this altar couldn't just be built anywhere. It had to be built on the Mount of Olives, facing the entrance to where the temple once stood. One day, Jesus Christ will return on the Mount of Olives. Zechariah 14:2-4 says, "Of those last days, for I will gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. And in that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west." The prophet Ezekiel tells us, "And the glory of the Lord came into the temple by way of the gate which faces toward the east." This is significant, that the Lord will come to the temple by the eastern gate, because at this time, the eastern gate or beautiful gate is shut, it's sealed, it is cemented up, which fulfilled the prophecy of Ezekiel 44:1-3. Ottoman Sultan Suleiman walled it up in 1541 AD, and it has stayed that way until today. And it's believed that the closing of the Eastern Gate was to prevent the Jewish Messiah from gaining entrance to the temple on the Temple Mount. And we were told when we were in Jerusalem in March of 2020 that Muslims also put a cemetery directly in front of the gate as an extra layer of precaution, believing that the Messiah, being a good Jew, would not walk through it and become unclean in doing so, which is pretty ridiculous, because if Jesus is who he says he is, nothing he touches is going to do anything to him. So there's that. As Christians, we have to get serious about our walk with God. We have to share as often and as much as we can with others about what's coming. This whole red heifer thing is sad to me. The vessels, the clothing, the gold covered this and that, the legalism of it all, it's already been done away with. Jesus was that final sacrifice. He was perfect, unblemished, sinless. He has taken away the sins of those who have repented. There is no further need for the shedding of blood. Hebrews 10:11-14 tells us, "And every priest stands ministering daily and offering repeatedly the same sacrifices, which can never take away sins. But this man, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins forever, sat down at the right hand of God, from that time waiting till his enemies are made his footstool. For by one offering he has perfected forever those who are being sanctified." The Jewish people are missing it, and this is heartbreaking to me. But I'm not going to set dates because that's ridiculous. I'm not even saying that there will be a sacrifice of the red heifer anytime soon, even though the Temple Institute's Facebook posts do point to that. For all I know, next week they will check those cows, and every single one of them will be disqualified by a single white hair. There was one TikToker a couple weeks ago who posted a video saying the sacrifice of the red heifer already happened on March 29th, Good Friday. But according to the Temple Institute's Facebook page and everything else I looked at, and I've been following them for over a year, it has not happened, not yet. And if we think it's bad in Israel now, just wait until that ceremony takes place. I cannot even imagine. A lot of Christians think that this is exciting stuff, like, wow, what a time to be alive. And it is, because our redemption is drawing near. And on one level, I completely agree. The thought of living in the presence of Jesus and the Father for eternity is just beyond my comprehension. But I know there are people who are not ready, so I can't be that excited about it. I just can't. For me, oh yeah, 100%, I'm looking forward to it. But I have friends and I have loved ones that are not ready, and maybe you do too. So we need to do everything we can to warn everyone we can, because things are happening so fast right now. We need to have on the full armor of God at all times, and we need to be constantly praying. We need to get rid of the distractions that are drawing us away from God's purpose for our lives. We need to stop focusing on materialism and what we can get out of this life, because it's nothing. It is absolutely nothing compared to eternity. And hey, if you're feeling convicted to share the gospel with someone, especially someone close to you, but you're afraid because they might reject you, just know if they reject anything, it's Jesus they'll be rejecting. And honestly, that is a heartbreaking thought. But we have to try. And if you're an introvert and the thought of speaking to someone face to face is horrifying to you, believe me, I know what you're feeling. But write them a letter. Share posts on Facebook for your friends and loved ones to see. Share this video or find another video by someone else if you think that somebody you care about would watch it. Time is getting so short, and there has already been a falling away, which the Bible speaks of. But we have to do what we can with the time that we have left. And speaking of time, I read something on Facebook a day or two ago that said, and I'm going to paraphrase it here, did you know that the time clock of the return of Jesus is not based on America's timeline? It's based on what's happening in Israel. Did you know Jesus wasn't a Christian? He was a Jew and kept the Jewish holy days and customs as well as the feasts of the Lord. When Jesus returns, he is not returning to America. He is going to plant his foot down on the Mount of Olives and go through the Eastern Gate, which is currently sealed off with 16 feet of concrete. And I'm going to add something to that. He's going to march right through that cemetery like it's a field of daisies. The final battle is not going to be on U.S. soil. It's going to be in the valley of Megiddo in Israel. And here's a photo of that valley. God did not replace the Jews with Christians. We are grafted in with them. So keep your eyes on Jesus, be vigilant, share with others the hope that is in you, stay watchful, and don't stop praying for your lost loved ones. Jesus said in Luke 18:1 that men ought always to pray and not lose heart. In case you're interested, I'll provide a link to the Temple Institute's Facebook page in the description below so you can keep up with what's going on. I'll see you next time when I'll be talking about the Great Falling Away. I really do appreciate the time that you all take to watch these videos. I hope you have a great week. And again, I want to thank you all so much for watching.